once again, lovies. It's David McGillivray here, comedy legend and horror icon. This is a show called Little Did You Know. It's a chat show in which I talk to people I find interesting, and I hope you agree. Um, Only a brief mention this week about Patreon because we've got a lot to get through. But Patreon subscribers, here comes the link as always. They get 15 minutes of extra material, and normally it's just me asking my guest impertinent questions about sex. More of that later, but right now, my guest here on YouTube today, he's a senior programmer of Flare, formerly the London Lesbian and Gay Film Festival. And if you're watching this on Monday, March the 15th, it opens in 2 days' time, only online this year, I'm afraid, but still a fantastic lineup of films, and that's what we're going to be talking about. My guests and I have also collaborated on a few projects, and one of them is the film Peter Jerome, Grandfather of Gay Porn. And look, there's a poster for it behind my head. The film is a peccadillo release. I've just been told by my glamorous assistant that I'm due some money for it. Oh, it's rather nice, isn't it? Let's have a look at this. What's all this about? Oh, I see strong nudity and real sex. Not for the faint-hearted. Back to my guest. Now, this is why I like him. Look, we've all been to film festivals, and what normally happens at the beginning of the evening is that the curator gets on stage and he or she says, thank you very much for coming, and here's a list of all the sponsors I'd like to thank. Please stick around afterwards for the Q&A, and that's it. It's a bit dull, I have to say. But when my guest mounts the stage of BFI South Bank, I always think, great, this is going to be fun. I mean, in all honesty, he puts on a performance. It's obviously been rehearsed, there are jokes, and there have been times when he's had all the laughs and applause, and the director of the film doesn't get anything. That's why I love him. Please say hello to the very wonderful Brian Robinson.
Hello, David, and hello, world.
Oh, let's face it, Brian, you're a media tart.
Well, I am. And more than you actually realize. When I was 3 years old, my mother thought, well, it's your birthday, let's get you in the newspaper. And I think she wanted a child who was famous. She liked famous people, and she transmitted that to me. And so my first appearance in a newspaper was dressed as a cowboy sitting on a toy horse with the headline, "A Ridin' and a Tootin'," with apostrophes instead of the letter G, which I do find slightly offensive. And I didn't know why my mother wanted me to put a cowboy suit on, because I hated cowboys. I loved dresses. And she wanted to butch me up a bit. And I didn't want to sit on the horse because I didn't like the toy horse it was a wheelie thing. So what I liked was kind of the attention and holding up my little pistols, and they said, no, go like this, and can you put the hat back? And I was thinking, oh, this is rather good. And then when I appeared on the front page of the newspaper, I thought, oh, this is more attention. I like this. And so you're quite right that I've never really wanted not to be in the limelight, which for someone who's painfully shy and racked with self-guilt, it's very odd that I'm just one of those people who kind of longs for the limelight. But I think it is all down to my mother, really, and her love affair with 40s film stars that she transmitted to me.
I bet that paper is in a scrapbook somewhere. I'm also given to believe that you won second prize in a fancy dress competition.
You're absolutely right. Again, my mother could see that I enjoyed wearing dresses, and well, we didn't have much else in the dressing up box. And after we'd been to see our favourite Julie Andrews in Thoroughly Modern Millie, I realised I wanted to be Thoroughly Modern Millie. And so we had a fabulous little cloche hat with leopard print fake fur, pearls, a stripy dress, my mother's heels, which were actually a dyed green to match the dress, but didn't match my dress at all. But somehow nobody noticed. Um, I won second prize. My sister won first prize as My Fair Lady. But unfortunately for her, and something she's never forgiven me 50 years later, is that I got my photograph on the front page of the newspaper and she didn't.
Tough, tough. That's showbiz.
It is showbiz. You just got to roll with the punches. And I did have quite a good career in the Cub Scouts and at school, because a lot of the other boys are very nervous about putting on a frock. But I just longed to get into anything. In fact, I loved it so much that we used to practice, me and the girl next door. We'd play a game called Queens, where we'd get on the longest frocks we could find and walk up and down the room, very stately like, to the test card, which in those days used to play slightly classical music and sometimes quite grand. And I aspired to being a major queen.
Now tell us about your frock today. It's delightful. Is it a designer label?
It is a designer label. It's by one of my favourites, British man from Nottingham, Mr. Paul Smith. I think Sir Paul Smith now. And yes, I'm in the country. I'm not in my usual home in London town. But I have to say, I don't have as large a wardrobe here in the country. So I've had to really go to the back of the wardrobe for something appropriate. Because one thing I've always liked to do, you say I treat presenting films like a performance. I always like to dress appropriately. And even if nobody notices, at least I know that the polka dot shirt is there because there's some character in the third act who has a polka dot shirt. Or I did once, when we were presenting a Bruce Weber film, I went online and bought the wrestling T-shirt that the lead boy in Chop Suey was actually wearing, and I still have it.
Well, you read my mind there, Brian. I was going to ask you where you are in the world. You are, in fact, in Kent.
I am in Kent,
You,
at
you,
a secret location not very far from the sea near Deal.
you used to have a wonderful house in Waterloo, not far from BFI South Bank. It was party central, I have to say. And I used to see your street constantly on TV and in films because was that terrace what, late Georgian or early Victorian?
It's interesting you should say that because it's very, very late Georgian. It's so late Georgian, it's actually from the reign of William IV. But I don't think there is any architecture called William IV. So it's either early Victorian or I think it must be late Georgian. They are very charming artisans' cottages. And a lot of people think they were built for railway workers, but in fact, the railway didn't come there until 18 years later. And one of the things they have in their lease is they were so close to Covent Garden that you weren't allowed to run a wholesale market garden operation because the people at Covent Garden wanted to keep it all above board and make a lot of money.
Well, Brian, you are an Ulster man. You later read for a law degree at Sussex University. I think I'm right in saying that you paid your way through college by working at Fortnum and Maitland, but then you got a job at the British Film Institute as their press officer. You were there for nearly 30 years, and you're still
30 years indeed.
doing.
Fortnum Masons was a holiday job,
Oh,
but I loved it because in those days, I don't know if you remember the 1970s, London was awash with celebrities. I mean, you could walk down a posh street and there'd be someone amazing. Um, in Fruit and Flowers and Fortnum Masons, all the best people came in. I just missed Alec Guinness. I was in my lunch hour, but I saw Kenneth Moore. I saw the back of Lady Clementine Churchill when she came in. And it was always very amusing to me that I had studied Pygmalion and loved My Fair Lady, of course. But when I went to work in a posh flower shop, that all the girls, they talked like Eliza Doolittle before the elocution lesson. And one young woman who was very charming, also liked to drink, I have to say. For her 18th birthday, she came back a bit pissed because she said, I've drunk a whole bottle of vodka. But she used to answer the phone and say, Fortnum Mason. And occasionally, very posh people would say, I'm sorry, can you pass me on to someone who speaks English? And she'd say, bloody cheek.
Well, you went on to hobnob with even more celebs at the British Film Institute as your part of your job as a press officer. We're going to come to that later. But going back to your childhood in Ulster, you've said in the past that it wasn't that easy growing up gay in Northern Ireland. I can well imagine that. So when you came to London, were you like the kid in the candy store?
Well, I was. I mean, I came out really very young. I was 16 when I first joined the Belfast Gay Liberation Society. And the boys at the Belfast Gay Liberation Society had a library, and in it they had a copy of the Spartacus Gay Guide. And they lent it to me to go to London. So I ran away to London, actually, while I was still at school. And told my father that I was going with the school and told the school I was going with my father. And so had a weekend away. And I did get to the Royal Academy to see the Pompeii exhibition, but I also got to the ICA to see Blue Lips in a very early performance. And I just went out every night, met lots of people, had lots of fun. The library was always very important to me as a boy growing up. And my favorite section was 301.4157, which was the Dewey Decimal Classification for homosexuality and sexual perversion. But there were all kinds of things in there. And one of them that wasn't too far away was a thing called the London Spy. And there was a section in it called Queer London. And it mentioned a Turkish bath. And I knew it was in Jermyn Street, and I walked up and down Jermyn Street, and could I find it? And then I saw two men in brown coats carrying a big piece of marble. And I noticed where they came out from, and there I saw a huge sign saying Turkish baths, and it had closed, and they were taking out the marble. So I never got to that Turkish bath.
No, you missed out on meeting Rock Hudson because he used to go there.
Oh, really? Did you come across him?
True, I didn't personally, but
I'm sure many others did.
oh yes, Google it. It's all over. It's all over the internet. Now, as I say, we have worked on a couple of projects involving the late great Peter Jerome. Oh my goodness, I do miss him. He died in 2014, and I think it was at his memorial that we had one of our natters. And I said to you, "How come you haven't even got a hint of an Ulster accent?" And I can't remember what your explanation was.
Well, my mother, who wanted me to be a star and a celebrity, thought I should lose my accent and become, I guess, more English. So I went to elocution to have the accent cured, as it were. We were very colonial. We looked to the English as being older and bigger and better. And I used to speak a bit like this. I'd say, hello, are you David McGillivray? No, oh, no, come on. And I'm not very good at it anymore because this is how I speak normally. I feel like Mike Yarwood there. But I thought I was posh, although actually I've discovered we were really lower middle class or petit bourgeoisie. But we had ideas above our station, and I thought I spoke with an English accent. When I came to England, people couldn't understand a word I said. They were saying, what did you say? I'd say, could I have a wee piece of that? Or something. I don't know.
Well,
But
I believe, I mean, you mentioned the name Mike Yarwood there just now, and I'm told that you do one impersonation. Is that true?
very occasionally, I try not to repeat stories too often. Although I did work with somebody who used to say, can we have number 37? Actually, you might get it later. But one day during the Ulster Workers' Council strike, there was a huge Orangeman's demonstration, a big day protesting against something or other, and the British government actually. And the Reverend Dr. Ian Paisley was the guest speaker leading the demonstration. And he was a great orator, he had a fantastic voice. I never forget when he stood up and said, "The long, hard road of our struggle is not over yet. And I say to you, the Protestant people of Ulster will never be defeated." And the impact of speaking well, addressing the crowd, I've never forgotten those principles of how to speak. Because, like you, I've been many times to cinemas or meetings where people say, "Hello, I'd just like to say," and I never want to be that person. I want people to be able to hear me at the back of the hall. Um,
Well, I'm most impressed, Brian. You could do Ian Paisley on Spitting Image. Maybe your time will come. We really ought to start talking about Flare, but
yes.
this may have to wait until after our break. We're going to take a break in just a second, but before then, I do want to talk about some of the people whose hands you had to hold when you were a press officer at the BFI. And I suppose the story everyone wants to hear is about Bette Davis.
Oh, that old thing. It is, I have to say, it's a favourite because my mother loved Bette Davis and she told me the story of the film Now Voyager before I'd ever seen the film. And I had a weird sense that celebrities were outside of our universe, that they were different, that we couldn't get close to them. But then as my life went on, I kind of realized that you could get close to them. And I also remember a BBC play called The Girls of Slender Means, which I think Miriam Margolyes was in. And she used to send off letters with a stamped address envelope asking for a signed photograph. And then she earned a shilling. And that gave me an idea. I thought, oh my goodness, well, I could write to somebody. I did actually write to Brian Faulkner, the Prime Minister, and got a signed letter, and wrote to Bernadette Devlin MP at the House of Commons. But she phoned up and said, can you tell your Brian that I'm not a celebrity and I don't give autographs, but my father knew her social worker, so the next week, I did manage to get her autograph on an envelope. But Bette Davis, she came to the BFI and she was a star guest at the BFI Awards, and she was a special late edition. So Dirk Bogarde was on stage getting his fellowship award for outstanding achievement, and he thought that he was the finale. But we had Bette Davis, who'd been 4 hours in makeup and hair. She was quite old by this time and had 4 strokes, but she was in very good form. And I was looking after her. And we needed to make a special dressing room for her, and she needed an ashtray. And we only had one ashtray for some reason. And by the time she was due to come out, she had filled the ashtray with cigarette butts, which were just had a little bit of her lipstick on them. And just before we were about to go on, she was smoking a cigarette. We were standing at the door to NFT1, and she said, "Brian, I need another ashtray." And I said, oh, okay. I was thinking, well, what do I do? We've only got one ashtray. One ashtray is filled with her cigarette butts, but they've got her lipstick on. Maybe they could be worth something. Oh, my God. And I remember that John Lennon's cigarette butts had been sold at Sotheby's for something like 200 quid, that the Smithsonian, I read later, actually have a 3/4 smoked cigarette by Bette Davis, but I was in such a tizzy, I thought I must serve my star. And so I took it straight into the lavatory, threw the cigarette butts into the pan and thought, what have I done? Oh my God, I'm not picking up wet, stinking, nicotine-soaked cancer sticks. So I just wiped it, flushed, and went back to Miss Davis with a clean ashtray. And we carried on.
And you made no money out of that at all. How tragic. Flare is due to begin in just a couple of days. If you're watching this on Monday, it includes a peccadillo release called Martyr. We're going to have a look at it, the trailer for it right now. Please enjoy and join us again in a couple of minutes.
قوم. ما صدقنا خلصنا، هلا رجعنا لنفس الخبرية. رجعوا دوروا له على شغل.
وين رح تروح أول شي؟ على البحر. ابني رايح على البحر.
شرفك خلي عمي. بتخاف اوقات اللي ما عاش بده يخوفنا بخيال السابق. طيب اذا انا بنط معك ماما تطلعي فيه. ليش ما عم بتشوفيني؟
That's Martyr. It's a peccadillo release. You can see it at Flare, as you saw. It's really homoerotic, says the Los Angeles Times. Shot in Beirut. And if you go to the site, the top comment is one of the best films I've seen of all time. How about that? And then also, I mean, do go there because there's some very funny comments from somebody calling himself Duncan Disorderly. I think I have heard that name before somewhere, but it still makes me smile. I'm David McGillivray. My guest is Brian Robinson, senior programmer of Flare. Brian, is that one of the films that ought to have a look at?
Martyr, I think I saw at the Venice Film Festival. But this year, the 35th edition of BFI Flare London LGBTIQ plus Film Festival, as I've learned to call it, is a bit smaller this year because it's online. But we're very lucky to have the festival at all. It's just as much work putting on an online festival as it is putting on a real life one, bizarrely. There are 26 features this year, and although it's online, you can pay to see them, but it's not limitless. Some of the things will sell out, so we're only allowed to sell a certain number of views, which is all to the good. So get your skates on. I'm sure there'll be a few released at the last minute. But the great news for this year is that all of the shorts are actually free. And throughout the festival, you can watch the shorts. You can just dip in and see one that's 5 or 10 minutes, go out on the town and come back and see another one anytime over the whole length of the festival. And if you pay to see a film, you could have I think a 4-hour window to see that as well. So it's quite flexible and quite good. The documentaries are incredibly rich this year. I mean, I've been doing this, I think, for over 20 years, actually. Maybe I shouldn't say that. But many of the films that are presented with a gay theme are about two shy young boys. And we do have plenty of those in this year's festival. But there comes a point when actually maybe you want something more than just two shy young boys. You want to know what happens after people meet. How does it mean to have a gay life where your relationships are going on, not just for a weekend or a few months, but actually how do you live with somebody, and how do you live a life when you've been living as a gay person or any one of the LGBTIQ plus letters? How do you live? And what has really excited me about this festival is that we do have some films that are about older people. There's a wonderful documentary called P.S. Burn This Letter, about letters from a drag queen, a load of drag queens. That is extraordinary. I'd like to talk more about it if I can.
Well, you neatly sidestepped my question, which was, should we go and see Martha? So I'll have to big it up myself. Yes, it's really homoerotic. There you are. It's shot in Beirut. I've booked my tickets. Shall I tell you about the other films I've booked for Brian?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so tell me if I've made the right choices. Boy Meets Boy, Firebird, Sublet, Enfant Terrible, Poppyfield.
I think they're all absolutely excellent choices. There's a couple of biopics. Enfant Terrible obviously is all about the wonderful Rainer Werner Fassbinder. We've got Tove Jansson, also the creator of The Moomins, who was also a lesbian, a wonderful biopic about her. There's a documentary that could almost be a biopic. It's the life of Connie Noonan, who was a trans woman and activist in the AIDS crisis in LA, who was a fantastic human being and very inspiring. Firebird, I think, is a spectacular film. It's got a standout performance from a very young and beautiful actor called Tom Pryor, who also wrote the script. It's the first-time director, Peter Rehan, and it's a fantastic love story set in Estonia in the Soviet era, when a fighter pilot and the lead character Sergei's best friend Louisa are fighting over the fighter pilot. But I'm used to seeing films with low budgets, but this one, it has a literal cast of thousands, many of whom are Estonian recruits who were turned into 70s versions of their modern selves. So very well seen. And Poppyfield, also from Romania, an Eastern European drama.
Are there any films in Flare this year about lockdown?
There's one short that was actually made before lockdown, and it's a weird science fiction short where people are wearing masks and there's been some kind of a cataclysm. And there's a guy walking through a street and he finds a bar that's operating somehow. He hears music, and it's weird and fabulous. But actually on the front of it, it says it was made before lockdown and it's science fiction. But actually it shows how we've been actually living in a science fiction moment. A few of the shorts were actually shot during lockdown. One of the more erotic ones in Heart's Desire, a film called Eden by Sven Spur. It's very good, and he had to bubble, I think, for 2 weeks with the cast, but that would have been no hardship.
Well, as you say, Brian, all the shorts are free to watch, and we're going to talk about how to do all this in a minute. But first of all, yes, absolutely astonishing to think that it was a year ago, almost to the day, when the last Flare was suddenly cancelled. My memory is that it was one of the first events to be cancelled, and just a couple of days before Flare was due to begin, I'd bought all my tickets, etc., and this was even before other cinemas closed down. So, what happened after that, Brian? Did Flare go ahead online?
Flare didn't go ahead in cinemas, but it did have a, a handful of things that were presented online. And we did Zoom interviews with directors, and it was much reduced, but it gave us an idea that it could be done. And one of my favorites was actually Ask Anybody, which I know a film that you've seen, and in fact, you're due to interview him, or maybe you already have. But
No, he's my guest next week, Brian.
oh well, I thought he was really great to talk to, and he was a bit nervous because he, his film was going on BFI Flare, and he said, "Am I the first person to introduce fisting onto BFI Flare?" And I had to tell him that actually I thought maybe he wasn't. We're a very broad church.
You certainly are. So this must have given you the confidence to go ahead with another online edition of Flare this year. But what's it like? It's not like the old days when you can swan around the world looking, pardon me, looking at film festivals. You can't even get together to discuss the films between you. So presumably all that is now done on Zoom, or what? How does it work?
Well, the films are presented, and then we actually have recorded Q&As for every film. And this year, for the first time, every film will have subtitles for the hearing impaired. And of course, one of the great things about a film festival is the contacts that you make with people, the unexpected collisions that appear. I mean, films have been made because people met each other at our festival. Relationships begin, all kinds of things. We're a catalyst. Somebody once said to me, "I think the films are irrelevant. It's the people I come for." And in fact, we know from surveys that we've done that some people actually don't buy tickets and just show up at the bar. But it's a great thing. But the films are absolutely at the heart of what we do. And so it's not the same watching at home, but at least you have more freedom to watch the film and maybe make a cup of tea while you're watching. And that you're guaranteed a Q&A that you can also switch off, which is very hard to do.
Now let's talk about how we book films for the online Flare. I've done it. I can tell you it's quite easy. I mean, probably you're going to give us a link now, which we'll print on the YouTube channel as well. But tell us how to do it. You go to the site. You just book for films in the normal way.
Absolutely. You just go to bfi.org.uk/Flare and go to the program, and then you'll see buttons to buy a ticket, and you'll be able to just book if there are tickets available. And then you'll get a code that you can go back to anytime during the festival.
Okay.
It's really easy. It's just like falling off a log, or if you've ever bought anything online, you'll be able to buy a ticket for Flare, trust me.
And what about the Q&A then? So we'll watch the film, and then when it's finished, there'll be an option for us to, in fact, virtually meet people involved in the film and ask them questions. Will they be live?
The Q&As are all pre-recorded. but they're with at least the director, and some of them do have actors as well. I'm very excited about meeting the star of Sublet, Niv Nissim, and John Benjamin Hickey, and the director Ethan Fox, who's a real festival favourite. There's a wonderful Q&A with Tom Pryor after Firebird. That's one of the ones that I've done. And I'd also recommend, actually, P.S. Please Burn This Letter, the film about the drag queen letters. That is extraordinary, because one of the people they talk to is James Bidgood, who's the director of Pink Narcissus. But he was originally a drag queen at the 82 Club on the Lower East Side and knew all of these other drag queens in the 50s. And these old guys are amazing. They are survivors. They have amazing memories. And it's actually extraordinary that the filmmakers managed to track down people in their 80s and 90s, many of whom don't even have a telephone, never mind be online. They had to hire private detectives to do it, but it's so worth it. And it's really one of my favorite films of the year.
Well, James Bidgood is in fact an exception to that. He was the director of a classic film called, as you say, Pink Narcissus, which was originally released with no director credit at all. But he subsequently owned up to it. And I don't know about you, he's now my Facebook friend.
I am indeed a Facebook friend with him, but I met him for the first time one memorable weekend in New York, where I also met Peter de Rome for the first time. So James Bidgood and Peter de Rome are really linked in my memory.
How wonderful. Well, as you say, it's such a shame that we're not able to get together this year, because the camaraderie at Flare, as you say, is absolutely wonderful. But one thing I hadn't taken into account was, well, there's always something positive to come out of a terrible situation. And the positive thing here is that for the first time, people from all over the UK can watch Flare films.
I think it's hugely important. And not only that, but the fact that they've all got hard of hearing subtitles as well, which can be very useful, and that you can watch them anytime within a 4-hour window. So it means they're more accessible, and it's not just for people who are in London. And with the Q&As, which are all pre-recorded, then if you press the button after the screening, you'll be able to hear a good long chunk of discussion about the film. And I have to say they're some of my favourite moments in the whole festival, the Q&As.
What do you think about the future, Brian? Is there going to be an online element now at all future film festivals?
The aim is to go back to as near normal as we can. That is our heartfelt hope. Last year's London Film Festival in the autumn did go ahead during a period sort of between lockdowns. But in research in Europe has shown that actually going to the cinema is not a major transmitter of the virus, that if you wear a mask, that actually you're a lot less likely at a concert or a cinema. So I think we might be seeing a lot more of mass entertainment on a big screen, because it's very different. However much I love seeing a film on my television screen or computer screen, there's something magical about seeing a film with an audience. If there's a joke, then at home, your lips might kind of wrinkle a bit. But in the cinema, somehow, it becomes a full-on laugh. And it's the best kind of medicine. It's like going to church. It's very spiritual, and it makes you belong. It can be a bit the other way. If people laugh in the wrong places sometimes, if you go to a straight cinema, I mean an ordinary cinema, and the minute a man comes on a dress, the whole audience is falling about laughing. And you just think, why? Haven't they seen a man in a dress before?
Oh, there is nothing like seeing a film on the big screen. I can't wait to get back to BFI South Bank, I don't mind telling you. But in the meantime, this will do for now. Flare is online from March the 17th until March the 28th. And we're going to give you the link for how to book tickets on the YouTube channel. So that's probably right underneath this screen. Brian, we have to wrap it up there. But only here on YouTube, because Patreon subscribers, I think this is where that link comes up again. There it is. Get 15 more minutes with me and Brian Robinson. You can go to Patreon right now and enjoy that. But for now, for everyone on YouTube, it's, thank you very much, Brian, and bye-bye for now.
Goodbye. Thanks for having me, David.
Entirely my pleasure. I will be back again next week at the same time with my special guest, Evan Purcell. And you heard us discuss him earlier. He is the man who put together a remarkable compilation film. It's called Ask Anybody, and it consists of something like 125 films from the classic era of adult gay entertainment, mostly in America. It is quite extraordinary, and I can't wait to talk to him about how he managed to put that film together. That's here next week. Please join me. Until then, from me, David McGillivray. Bye bye.